The small island of Begnish in Valentia harbour is an impressive repository of archaeological heritage, including a monastic site, a cillín, Napoleonic signal tower, and perhaps most importantly, the settlement in what is called Canroe, on Ceann Rua in Irish. Facing Church Island, this is regarded by many as a Viking settlement, especially due to one particular house, imaginatively called House 1. This house is said to be in Norse style, and also contained an important runic stone. As a result, it is widely believed that there was a Norse or Hiberno-Norse presence on the island. Commonly, it is referred to as a Viking settlement. However, Norse or Hiberno-Norse are far more accurate terms here. The Canroe settlement contains 8 houses, 8 animal shelters, 15 cairns, and various stone walls. It appears to have developed in 2 separate phases and have been abandoned in the middle, perhaps only for a short period though. Although there have been excavations on the island, notably by O'Kelly in the 1950s, most of this area has not been excavated. Indeed, one wonders what a full-scale excavation would unveil here. However, this does not look like happening in the immediate present. In the meantime, the OPW should consider putting up signs saying that the area is of archaeological importance. As the last time I visited, someone had lit a fire in the middle of the settlement. Since its discovery, various explanations have been advanced for the Begnish settlement. Due to the runic stone and the style of House 1, it is seen by some as a Norse settlement, possibly a waystation between the large Norse towns in Cork and Limerick. Some archaeologists disagree, saying it is Irish, in other words Gaelic, and rejecting the waystation theory. In this video, I want to both present the impressive archaeological heritage that can be found on the island and to look at the various interpretations. The eastern end of Begnish Island consists of a narrow isthmus which ends in a plateau called Canroe, or, on Ceann Rua, the Red Head in Irish. It was first excavated in the 1950s by O'Kelly, who also excavated the nearby Church Island. However, O'Kelly did not excavate the entire site, rather he focused on 2 houses, a cairn and an animal shelter. Interestingly, these were partially exposed before the excavation because erosion, hastened after the supposed introduction of rabbits to the island in the 1920s, had removed most of the grass cover in Canroe. However, in recent years, this coverage has strongly returned. Often, much of House 1 is hidden by tall, spiky grass, probably marram grass. Of the 2 houses O'Kelly excavated, the one called House Number 1 has attracted the most attention over the years. Due to its unusual form, and because on its innermost lintel was a stone with a runic inscription and a cross, it has become popularly regarded as a Viking, or more accurately Norse, house. Before excavation, it appeared to be a mound of stone. Afterwards, it was found to be a circular house, 11 meters in external diameter and 6.75 in internal. Importantly, it has a sunken floor. The corbelled or dried stone wall rises to a maximum of 3.5 meters above the floor and has an average thickness of 1.9 meters. The entrance to the house is on the east. It consists of a linteled entrance passageway 2.5 meters in length. On the outside, there is an open sunken entranceway running for 5 meters, whose sides are formed by retaining walls of boulders. Above the doorway is a linteled opening, similar to some sort of vent, while there is another opening in the rear wall. Most importantly, on the underside of the innermost lintel stone was a runic inscription and a cross. However, this was positioned in such a way that the inscription could not be read properly. Indeed, part of the inscription was damaged. While this stone is taken as evidence that House 1 was Norse, as pointed out by Gibbons, the fact that most of the inscription could not be read raises questions about the use of the stone. Probably the stone was carved and used elsewhere, though it is impossible to know exactly where, and only afterwards recycled or reused when it was placed in this house. In part of the floor, there was what archaeologists call a carbonized spread or a hearth deposit, basically marks left by a fire in the center of the house. The house also appears to have had a timber-framed roof, with the radial timbers being anchored in the 6 oblique sockets located in various parts of the wall, at an average height of 2 meters. On the north side of the house is another structure, one that was rectangular and said to be of inferior masonry. Measuring 4.5 by 3 meters internally, its walls are a little over a meter high and between 1 and 2 meters in width. It also appears to have had a wooden roof and to be from a similar time as the house. It was probably not used for habitation, but could have had an agricultural purpose, such as storing food or housing livestock. There were a number of interesting finds in the excavation of the house, notably a polished cruciform pin made from bone or ivory, a fragment of a bone comb, a rotary whetstone, and a soapstone bowl. These, which were found in the house and in the settlement in general, are pointed to as evidence of it being a Norse settlement, but equally they could have been obtained through trade or even by violent means. In addition to the 2 excavated houses, even a cursory visit to the site can find ample traces of human settlement, well mapped by O'Kelly and the archaeologists who have worked on the island since him. These include field boundaries, houses, pens, walls of many types, and other structures. Although it does not appear in any written histories, Canroe provides us with a different type of historical account. It was one of various settlements in Valentia harbour in the early Christian and pre-Norman period. It was probably abandoned a little before the arrival of the Normans, though we really do not know when it finally came to an end. However, more interesting than its end date is identifying what sort of settlement it was: Gaelic, Viking, Hiberno-Norse, or even some sort of mestizo settlement with people from different cultural backgrounds. In his initial excavation of Begnish, O'Kelly believed the site was a Gaelic fishing and farming community. He considered the possibility of Norse settlement in the area, but notwithstanding what had been presented above, did not really consider the possibility of Begnish being a Norse settlement. This seems to have first been advanced by Ceann et al. In 2001. For the latter, the form of House 1 was extremely unusual in an Irish context. They see its sunken floor as being characteristic of the Grubman house tradition of the Scandinavian, Germanic, Slavic, and Anglo-Saxon worlds. However, only the Norse or Scandinavian tradition is considered. The other options are seen as being far too radical. The style of the house, the various finds, and the runic stones are the main pieces of evidence used to justify a new argument. Ceann and al. Raised 4 suggestions for the settlement: that it was a farmstead, a trading station, a long fort, or a waystation, and, or indeed, a combination of these. They reject the first 3 suggestions, opting for the latter, a waystation. They see Begnish as a waystation, or a type of stopover or safe haven between the Norse cities of Cork and Limerick. Based on an estimate of 36 nautical miles a day as the maximum distance a Norse boat could be rowed, they say that there should have been 9 or 10 such waystations. Since this calculation is based on the miles a Norse boat could be rowed, it excludes other methods of propulsion, notably sail. They also raise some other possible way stations, such as Scattery, Smerrick, Dursey Island, and Whiddy Island. I want to talk about the runic stone now, as it is probably the most important artifact found on the island. The stone is held by Cork County Museum. Unfortunately, it does not appear to be on public display at present, which is a shame, as it is of great importance. However, hopefully in the near future it'll be on display again, or even be lent to another museum, such as a Kerry County Museum in Tralee. Initially, O'Kelly interpreted the runes on the stone to read, Lear erected the stone, M... carved the runes, thereby making it appear that someone with a Gaelic name was responsible for having the stone carved and erected. However, more recent interpretations have offered different versions of the name, either Ver or Vir instead of Lear, both of which are Old Norse names, with the name of the carver being said to be Munfror. It is important to point out here that the end of the inscription is almost completely obliterated, thereby hindering interpretation. Whether these names are Gaelic or Norse is important. O'Kelly's reading of Lear led him to believe that it was a mark of Hiberno-Norse or Gaelic-Norse integration. However, Ceann and Al, who believe the names are Norse, see this as evidence the settlement was a Scandinavian one. Another important point is the position of the stone. When O'Kelly found it, the runes could not be read properly. Probably correctly, he believed this meant that the stone was first placed elsewhere. He believes it could have been a grave marker. However, it did not have the name of the person buried. Ceann et al. Offer a more complex reasoning, saying that it was placed in the house for a symbolic reason, to emphasize the cultural or ethnic link between those who originally erected the stone and those who built the house. Something that is evidenced in runic inscriptions in churches in Scandinavia. The fact that the stone has a cross on it echoes this reasoning. However, the question has to be asked, was the stone placed there because it contained runes, or are the runes something accidental or irrelevant? Was the stone placed there because it was useful, not because of any symbolic significance it may have had? My feeling is that the builders would have been aware of the runes, and may well have deliberately placed it over the lintel, especially since the stone contained a cross, and was therefore Christian to some extent. Obviously, this is impossible to prove, and I could very well be wrong. It is now worth turning to the question of who were the inhabitants of the settlement on Begnish. Since the work of Ceann et al., it has been regarded as a Viking or Norse or Hiberno-Scandinavian settlement. This has filtered into the common perception, obvious in the tourist industry in Valentia, that it was a Viking settlement. But was it? In an interesting article, Michael Gibbons contests the perceived notion that Begnish was Norse. Although I do not want to answer this question here, as I prefer to let people draw their own conclusions, Gibbons does make some good points. Notably, that it needs to be interpreted as one of several settlements in Valentia harbour, and also emphasising the cultural impact of the Norse on Gaelic Ireland, whether in terms of weapons, architecture or trade. Was Begnish a Viking or Norse settlement? If by Norse we mean only Norse and not Gaelic Irish, then most likely it was not. However, this does not exclude the possibility that there were Norse living there, though this raises the question of what does Norse or Viking mean in 10th or 11th century Ireland. Constant contact and intermingling meant that the Norse and Gaelic would have become very intermixed. Who were the Vikings of Limerick who fought for Brian Boru and were one of the keys to his success? Some would have been Scandinavian born, but the majority would have been born in Ireland, and probably would have been a mix of Gaelic and Norse. Traditional history loves clear-cut divides, but in reality, history is more often a mess, full of overlapping and often contradictory groups. In a way, it is irrelevant whether Begnish was a Viking settlement. It was a human settlement, probably a mestizo one, a mixture of different individuals from different cultures, struggling to survive in a hostile and complicated world. It was one of several settlements in Valentia harbour which formed a social network, interacted with each other and with the rest of South Kerry and Munster. Probably some of those living there were from a Norse background, while other Norse objects ended up there through commerce or, indeed, through violence, such as raids. Also on Begnish, a few hundred meters away from Canroe, was a monastic settlement, one that is now completely overgrown and has never been excavated. It is possible that this settlement existed at the same time as the one in Church Island, and perhaps even Ilonlochon at the other end of Valentia harbour, as well as the earlier years of the Canroe settlement. This is a further piece in the complicated jigsaw that is the history of Valentia harbour and Begnish. We'll probably never be able to complete this jigsaw. However, we can preserve the pieces that survive, and based on these, try to paint an accurate picture of the past. That is history.